everyone, and welcome to A Broad's Way Through Broadway. I'm your host, the Broad, Allison Chicorel, and today we are discussing The Drowsy Chaperone. Here to join me is actor, singer, pianist, director, playwright, composer, and a million other things, Matt Zembrowski. Annoyingly talented. Show off, Mr. Matt Zembrowski. Thanks for joining me.
You're very welcome.
This is your second time on the show now, so thank you so much for coming back.
Hey, you're very welcome. I love it.
Awesome. So Drowsy Chaperone. Okay, for those of you who are not familiar with this show debuted in May of 2006, featuring a cast including Sutton Foster and a whole bunch of movie and TV people, actually. We got Georgia Engel, Edward Hibbert, and the writer of the musical, Bob Martin. Music and lyrics by Lisa Lambert and Greg Morrison. This show won 5 Tony Awards and 7 Drama Desk Awards and was nominated for a billion other things, too. So Drowsy Chaperone, before we dive into things here, Matt, how would you... Because this is a weird show. This is kind of like when we did Putnam County Spelling Bee. It's like, this is kind of an interesting show to describe what it's about or what it is or what kind of show it is. How would you describe The Drowsy Chaperone?
Honestly, I would describe it as kind of the ultimate musical theater fan's musical. Because really the whole show... it takes place in the apartment of an unnamed narrator. I think he's just referred to as the man in the chair in the original cast recording. And it was played by Bob Martin, like you said, the author of the show. He basically puts on his favorite record, his favorite musical theater album record of a show called The Drowsy Chaperone. And he kind of narrates it for the audience. So it's a musical within a musical kind of a thing, but it is so loaded with sort of insider nerdy stuff and references to other shows that theater folks, real true theater folks are supposed to try to find. And that's really the plot of it. The plot of the show that's in a show is really kind of comically inconsequential. To try to explain it would really kind of take time that we don't need to spend because that's not really what it's about or what it's for.
Right. Yeah, it's so much like satire and spoof in there. And I definitely think that the show is enjoyable for anyone, but it is obviously going to be more enjoyed by, theater people. The more into theater you are, because there's just so much more in there that you can appreciate and find enjoyable. But I think I know my mom is not a theater person necessarily. She goes to see a lot of shows, but that's about it. But she doesn't do anything about it.
I was just going to say, how on earth did she end up being your mother?
Well, it's my dad. My dad
there we go.
My dad is the hammy theatrical, nut job who is always on. So that's that. That's
Perfect.
That history of how I became who I am. But my mom is not the, she doesn't like the spotlight, and she never want to be on stage, anything like that. But she loved The Drowsy Chaperone, and she was able to catch quite a bit of the things in there that would normally appeal to actors and actresses, musical theater people specifically. She enjoyed it. She saw a production of it when we did it at the Box Theater, at the theater that I run, and enjoyed it a lot.
Great.
What is your background in relation to the show? You've worked this show, right?
I've done it a couple times, and actually, I have a really cool kind of story for you. And this is sort of my karmic way of apologizing in a way for. Is
it about you meeting Drowsy Chaperone cast members? Because
well, I mean, I have plenty of stories about that, but funny enough, no. I went to New York. I want to say 2007. So after this show had been around for a while. I of course, I'd only been to New York a couple times at that point, and my aunt and uncle were treating me. They said, you're done with college now, and we want to, as a present to you, we're going to take you out to New York and we're going to see some shows, because they knew that that's what I was into. And so they got there first. They arrived in New York before I did, a few hours before I did. And so I kind of had a mental checklist of like 7 or 8 shows that I wanted to see, and we had at most 5 slots that we could go see shows in. And so by the time I landed, they said, "Hey, we've already got your ticket taken care of." And I'm like, "What? You didn't even ask what I wanted. How did that work out?" Okay. So we met up in Times Square, and they showed me that they had a ticket to the Drowsy Chaperone, which honestly was like number 8 on my list of 7 shows that I wanted to see. And so I looked at it, and it was one of those moments, and I look back on it with such deep regret, because you know how at Christmas you get something from an aunt or an uncle, and you go, "Oh, that's so nice. Thank you." I couldn't even disguise my disappointment. Because I knew that there was something I really wanted to see that I wouldn't be able to now because I was stuck seeing the Drowsy Chaperone, which, you know, by that point was kind of passé. It was old news.
Yeah.
So we went to the theater, and of course, I had fairly low expectations, and I was like, well, whatever. It was a present, so I'm going to say thank you. It's a free ticket. I'm not going to whine too much.
Yeah.
And within the first like 4 minutes, I was just in tears laughing. It was so funny. And it's one of those shows that I was so surprised by how much I liked it that I think it just made me enjoy it even more. And by this point, Bob Martin was no longer in the cast, and I think Sutton Foster had also moved on.
Okay.
But most of the original cast was there. I actually saw, I think his Glover. I can't remember what his first name was. He was the first person, I think, that took over. He was right before Bob Saget went in, which is funny because I actually went to go see Young Frankenstein on that trip, and Bob Saget was in the theater at Young Frankenstein.
I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, I was like, "Oh, hey, I'd love to see you in Drowsy Chaperone, but it sounds like I missed you by a couple of weeks." Like, yeah, you'll have to come back.
So that story that wasn't about you meeting famous people still somehow ended up...
It did kind of veer into meeting famous people, yes, but you know.
Those of you who missed
They're
Matt's
everywhere
other
in New York.
episode-
They're just people. You just drop the famous when you go to New York. They're just everywhere.
Those of you who missed the last episode where Matt and I chatted about Adam's family, Matt goes to New York every, like 5 minutes basically, and meets all the famous people, all of the people he meets them. That's why I invite him on this show, so he can talk about all these people that he's met in person, and
yeah,
because it's so fun.
Here's the irony of that is the show played at the Marriott Marquis Theater, which is actually the theater's in a hotel. It's in a Marriott hotel, and I could not find the stage door to save myself. I am scrambling all over the place looking because another one of the actors, Harriet Engel, who recently passed away, which makes me very sad because she's so delightful.
Yeah.
She was no longer in the show, but Joanne Worley, who was on a show called Laugh-In when my parents were younger, they loved that show, Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. And I desperately was trying to go find the stage door so I could find her and tell her how much my parents loved watching them and how much I enjoyed watching her in the show. But I could not find it anywhere.
Wow. So that's really sad.
It is terribly sad. And and I've tried looking back. I mean, for better or worse, there hasn't really been a show in the Marriott Marquis that I've wanted to see recently. So
that's
finding
what I was
the stage door
hasn't
hasn't
been. Have you since found it on any of your other visits? Have you since found
It's hard to tell. I went to go the only other time I think I've been in the Marriott Marquis is for I'm even going to lie about that. I think the Easter Bonnet, the Broadway Cares Easter Bonnet show that I went to was in the Minskoff, which is where Lion King plays, which is actually, it's pretty close. And that stage door I could find because I walked outside and Lea Salonga was standing right like 10 feet from me. So I'm like, okay, well, I know where this stage door is.
Of course she was.
Not that I was looking for it.
Princess Jasmine just like hanging, like, just... Jeez. Okay. Anyway, so that kind of leads me into our next kind of point of discussion. First impressions. Your first impression of the show was kind of, I guess I'll see it, I suppose, and which is kind of funny because of how it ended up turning out.
Right.
That it was
and
so
it ended up
wildly
absolutely
enjoyable.
being one of my favorites. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
For me, it was the same. When I wasn't familiar with it when it was pitched to do at the theater, and I was looking into it and going like, okay, I only kind of understand what is going on in this script? Like, I mean, it's not one of those ones that you can instantly kind of picture how it's going to work. So I was unfamiliar with it, but I thought it was such a blast. I was able to, I was in the ensemble. We had an ensemble of 2 people in our production. I was a skanky maid, you know, like I am. And it was so fun to watch this show come together.
Oh yeah.
The man in the chair is a super, super fun role, and the man in the chair is the kind of the main character, the narrator, as Matt said earlier. The role that the author played, and it's fun because it's kind of one of those roles where it could be, you know, it could be an old guy, it could be a young guy, it could be a woman, you know, it can be really anyone who's going to be able to, who can kind of portray that person with such a passion for musical theater and classic musicals, and it's such a charming character to kind of to sort of hang out with during the show, because he does, you know, break that wall and talks directly to the audience and things like that. So it's kind of like you're hanging out with this character of the show throughout the entire show, which is only like an hour 15 minutes long. It's a short show.
It's not long, and if I'm not mistaken, I don't even think there's an intermission.
There typically
people have done it with an intermission.
Yeah.
We did it with an intermission the couple times that I directed it, just, you know, because we want to give people a break in the audience. But it's not written that way.
No,
I think
it's
the original
length
Broadway
of a
production
movie.
was
It's
like
more
an hour
like
and a half.
throw an intermission in because we're a theater and we sell money. We get money at concessions, and
yeah, right.
And I know that's why we put it on intermission. It's like, we make some good donations during our concession break, so we'll still do an intermission. That's
how it goes.
But it's short. Act 2, if you blink, you miss it. So that's, oh my gosh, that's so funny. So you said you were not so keen on seeing it, and then 5 minutes in, you were laughing your head off.
Totally hooked.
Do you remember who the female lead, Janet Vandergroot?
Janet Vandegraff, yeah. No,
Vandegraff.
I do not remember who it was. I'd really have to go and dig out my my playbill, and maybe when we take our little break, I can go and find it, and we can discuss it. I do know.
I'd be interested in seeing who you saw.
Sure. I mean, I know I did see the original Drowsy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Danny Bernstein was still playing Aldolfo at that point.
Oh, okay.
I know that the 2 of them were still original, but beyond that, I can't recall. So I am going to do that. I'm going to go find. I know exactly where all of my Broadway playbills are. I'm going to go find it during our break.
Nice.
And then when we reconvene, I will tell you exactly who I saw.
Awesome. So.
And John Glover was the name of the man in the chair.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
If anybody saw Gremlins 2, which was really, really big when I was growing up, he was in that. He played a really funny part in that too. So it's kind of a trip to see him on stage.
Interesting. Oh, that's fun. Okay, so casting. Did you hear the score, the Broadway soundtrack, before you saw the show, or no?
I honestly don't remember. I'm gonna guess not.
Okay.
Because I'm sure if I would have heard it, I would have been much more enthusiastic going to see it.
Mm-hmm. Because it's a great score.
Oh yeah.
Like the music is really fun.
Yeah, it's kind of meant to be what they call pastiche, which is, you know, sort of lovingly recreating a different style. It's meant to the album of the musical that is central to the show, the Drowsy Chaperone itself, is supposed to be one of the old 20s musicals, which was much heavy on music and not so heavy on plot. And it not only does a really good job of sort of going back to that 20s Rodgers and Hart.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I didn't even think of it that way. When I first heard the score, I loved the music, and obviously, you know, Sutton Foster, you know, of course. But like,
yeah, right.
I was not really familiar with any of the other cast members of this show.
Yep.
Georgia Engel, I know, is, you know, from TV and movies and stuff like that. This seemed to have a lot of not necessarily people who were on Broadway a lot, and I know a lot of them were Bob Martin's friends, like people who we've worked with before off stage, I think, if I recall correctly. But I just remember thinking, because usually when I listen to a Broadway score, there's usually like 2 or 3 performers in there that I at least know from a few other things. And this one, I feel like it's Sutton Foster, like freaking queen of Broadway up there with like no one else who's like super, super well known in Broadway. I'd be interested to see the next after with everything going on, the next group to perform this show, whether it's at a school or community theater or one of the regional theaters or something, to see what they do with Aldolfo. Because I've seen it both ways too. I have not seen a pasty white Aldolfo like Danny Bernstein. I haven't. Ours was at least a darker skinned man who does have Spanish. I believe he has Spanish somewhere down the line. So it's like some of that I think did carry through. But he wasn't like a straight up like Latin person. So it worked. It worked, and it was fun. And even if you like go, for personally, like what I do, if I have auditions coming up and I see who's coming to my auditions and there's something about the quantity of the turnout or quality of the turnout that's making me nervous, I extend invitations to specific people where it's like, I'm pretty sure I'd have something for this person just to sort of give myself more options. But even when you do that, yes, you're sometimes just not able to. In community theater and in school theater, you gotta put together the show with what you were given. And as a director, I know that's something that's changed. That's changed me a little bit, because when I was younger, I'd sometimes see a show and I'd wonder, this person, like, why did they get that? Why did they get that role? Why did they cast this person as this role? And I would be a little judgy about it. I would be a little bit like, I would have cast someone different. And now after years of directing and learning, sometimes you have a lot of options and sometimes you just don't. And this is what you're given to work with, and so go ahead. And I no longer judge it anymore, because I never know if it's something like, maybe this was the turnout that they got and it wasn't the director's fault and that was the best they could get out of this. Like, it's just something that's tangent that has nothing to do with Drowsy Chaperone, but it's just something that we learn as directors. All right, listen, I think this is a good spot for us to take a break. So you're going to go look through your playbills, and we're going to find out which cast you saw, you lucky son of a, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about some production aspects and some of our favorite things, favorite scenes and songs from Drowsy Chaperone. So we'll see you in a little bit, right after this word from our friends at 6'5 Media.
Hey, this is TC.
And this is Jim from the Studio Demands It podcast,
where every episode we take a demand from a hypothetical studio,
which could be you,
and challenge ourselves to conceptualize, pitch, and craft a film based on the stipulations
or the demands
we are given. We talk about movies all the time. Particularly, we complain about the choices made in the films we've seen.
We're nerds like that.
And, of course, like any good nerd does, we automatically assume that we could do better.
Even with the demands and restrictions that clearly must have been put on by a production.
So head on over to studiodemandsit.com and listen to our previous library of episodes. Our library of previous episodes. Our precious library, Jim. Our library of precious episodes.
You're a pirate, Smeagol.
Okay. So head on over to studiodemandsit.com to listen to our library of episodes.
And submit your demand for a future episode, too.
So go do that.
Okay, bye.
Okay, end of ad.
Hi, I'm Ryan.
And I'm Mike.
And we are brothers-in-law. We both love beer and are amateur home brewers.
Wait, so does that make us brothers-in-law?
I believe so.
Every episode, we will talk about aspects of beer and home brewing.
But nothing super technical, because we're learning this too.
So join us as we sit down together and dive into something beer-related.
Whether it's a little field research, tasting a certain beer style, or beers from a specific brewery.
Talk about our experiences brewing beer at home, including our own solo brews, as well as themed competitions we'll set up along the way.
We will also talk about some of our favorite aspects of brewing, like hops, extra ingredients, building our brew cave, and more. And of course, our own misadventures that have happened along the way.
So, if you like beer, are home brewing already,
Or if you have an interest in home brewing and don't know where to start,
Join us on Brothers-in-Law Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
and make sure to follow us on Twitter at Brothers-in-Law and check out our website, brothersinlaw.com.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And we're back to A Broad's Way Through Broadway. I hope you enjoyed your intermission. I'm Allison Chicorel here with Matt Zembrowski. We're talking about Drowsy Chaperone. And Matt, so when we left, you were going to go look at your playbill from when you saw this show in New York on Broadway to find out what cast you saw. Did you see some original cast members? Who was replaced?
I did actually, and it took a little longer to find my playbill than I thought it was going to. And I can even tell you when, because it always says when this was June of 2007 that I went to go see the show. So it had been playing for a while,
like a year, I think.
Yeah, about that. It was definitely after the Tonys where we kind of knew what was going on with that. So there were still a number of original cast members that were in it. Danny Burstein, who we kind of mentioned in the first half, was still playing Aldolfo at that point. And I remember very distinctly watching him and going, wow, you can tell that he's found every possible moment. Like you could just tell as a performer that he'd been doing it for a while, and he was still having fun with it. And Beth Level, who we also mentioned, who played Drowsy in the original cast, she was still going at that point.
Okay.
As was the guy who was playing Robert Martin, whose name is Troy Britton Johnson.
I don't know him.
I'm not. He does not have. He was in the Broadway production of Damn Yankees with Jerry Lewis.
Okay.
If that means anything, and I don't know if he's gone on to do anything since then. Both of the gangsters were still original at that point.
Okay.
Garth and Jason Kravitz, who I just found out beforehand were brothers.
They're brothers, yeah.
Yeah, and then the original Kitty was still playing it. Jennifer Smith is her name.
Okay.
So
That's
there
a fun
was
role,
still quite a bit.
character
Oh,
of
Kitty is such a
so
great
fun.
role, and it's easy to kind of overlook how much fun that part is, because she's written to be kind of the bubblehead.
She reminds me of
airheaded
Lily
one.
St. Regis from Annie.
Oh, a little bit,
Yeah.
but there's so much depth to it, and it's, I mean, honestly, if you know that that's what you're going to be playing, you can really bite into that.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't have to be a reflection of who you are as a person, because that's the fun of playing such silly parts on stage.
Yeah, no, I agree. If I ever did the show again, I'd be shooting for Kitty. That's a super fun role like that. Those are types of roles that I'm drawn to. Those ones that's like kind of supporting as potential scene stealer kind of character. That's super fun.
And then if you screw up, no one remembers.
Right. It's like well featured, but not as much pressure.
Right. Totally. It's on one shoulder and not both.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Okay, so now you said something interesting that with the actor who playing Aldolfo, alongside some of the cast members who, were the original performers and had like a gajillion shows under their belts, and then obviously some replacements who were kind of new to the cast. I won't say I'm sure I have, and I just didn't pay enough attention, but it's interesting what you said, because there probably is a big difference between the actors from the original cast performing the show with people who are kind of new to the show. And that's, I think, something that people maybe don't necessarily look into a lot or think about a lot when they're watching a cast, when it is such a big mix of the original cast members and newer cast members. I'm thinking about the actor who played Mufasa in Lion King, and he played that role. I think it was something like 800 performances or something like that. It was insane, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, how do you do a role that many times and keep it fresh? Like, holy Christmas! And then
I had an acquaintance who was the original Monsieur Andre in Phantom of the Opera, and he played that show. It was something absurd, like 15,000 performances.
That is insane.
And I got to see him before he moved on to a different show. He was acquaintances with my mom, and we met up. And I asked him, I said, "How do you do that?" And he said, quite honestly, I put all of my kids through college on this part, and it gets to a point where you've done it so many times that you literally couldn't screw it up if you tried. It is so deeply in your bones.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a question of when is this a job and when is this still fun? And he said that he still found fun. You know, it comes from seeing the new performers experiencing it, like you were just talking about, and just finding the little moments that the audience gives you, because that's really the only way I would think. I've played one role about 120 times before, but it's different because I was playing piano for it as well as acting. So
That
there
was
was,
for Nicely
there were
Nicely?
constantly.
Guys
No,
Know?
that was for the Cut a Hit Carol at Christmas. I played Myron Nitsky. But that one, you know, I was the only member of the orchestra. I was the orchestra. And so if a particular performer missed a beat or if the audience coughed or whatever, I mean, I was sort of controlling the music as well. So I didn't have the same rote experience that some of these long-term performers have had. But you start feeling it in your bones a little bit. You start feeling it in your muscle memory, and it gets harder and harder to forget. I could probably still recite most of Myron's speech at the end if really pressed.
Well, and it's got to be, like you said, different audiences and reacting differently. And actually, I'm pretty sure I can safely say that if I were performing in a show for the gajillionth time, but all my castmates, or most of my castmates, were brand new to the show, I definitely think that aspect would keep my performance fresh. It's kind of like when if you've watched a movie a million times and you find out that your friend or your spouse or whoever hasn't seen it, and you get to watch it with them and they're watching it for the first time, you enjoy it differently. And I think it's probably kind of like that, where if it's the same show over and over with the same people over and over, that's one thing. But if there's different people watching it or different people participating, that's gotta help keep it fresh. That's interesting. So this show was written by two composers who I don't know, a lyricist and composer who I had to look up who they were in regards to this show, as well as their credits for other shows. Lisa Lambert and Greg Morrison. Not familiar with them. So, are you?
No, and I kind of had to look up other things that they had done too, and it's not household stuff.
No, it's not. It's this is normally the time in the episode where we talk about the composer's other credits and their other works and how this show compares to their other works. And I don't really know how we can talk about that for this particular episode, because I don't think either of us is really even familiar with their other works to even have any sort of comparison discussion.
Yeah. As far as I understand, and I will tell you that a lot of the people involved in this show are actually friends with the writer, Bob, whose real name is Bob Martin.
Right.
Who was involved in a show in Canada, a really big hit show in Canada called Slings and Arrows. Which if you've never seen it, it's a terrifically funny show about a Shakespearean actor who's sort of forced to take over a Shakespeare festival in Canada when the festival's artistic director dies suddenly. And he's haunted by the ghost of the previous artistic director. And Bob Martin was one of the head writers on that. It's also where Rachel McAdams got her start.
That almost sounds like I Hate Hamlet the musical or something.
Something like that. It is. It is just spectacularly funny. Bob Martin actually makes an appearance on that. But Greg Morrison, I guess, did some music work on that show too, and that would really probably be about the only other thing that I know him from.
Right. Yeah. No, I was not familiar with them at all. I did know that they were friends. I did find our fun fact for this episode taking place a little late in the episode, but fun fact: the playwright, as you said, Bob Martin. It was a surprise party hosted, I think, by like Lisa Lambert, Greg Morrison, other people involved in the show before the show was a thing. Had like this surprise party for him where the theme was like this fake musical, and it kind of spiraled into an idea of the Drowsy Chaperone.
This could really
musical,
be a thing, yeah,
or something.
No, it was originally written as a surprise part of Bob Martin's bachelor party. And his real life, his real life wife is named Janet Van de Graaff. And the character of the ingenue in the show, The Drowsy Chaperone, is named Janet Van de Graaff. And so it was just written as kind of a This Is Your Life sort of a spoof parody musical. And somebody one of the producers that was there went, this is better than just like a little gag spoof bachelor party thing. You should really think about doing something with this. And as I understand it, the very first production of it had a lot of the songs in it, but the man in the chair had not been, he hadn't been added to the show yet.
Isn't that so hard to imagine?
It's unbelievable to imagine that that somebody thought that the silly, nonsensical, like the Drowsy Chaperone, the album that the man in the chair is listening to, would have enough there to be its own show.
Yeah, it's almost like
it's really
almost
not.
like you wonder, how did it even, because I feel like the man in the chair character is the reason that the show works.
Oh yeah,
at all.
Yep, 100%.
So
I mean, there's a lot of good material that comes about because of him.
Yes.
But I don't know. I don't think that show works at all. And it's actually funny that you should say that, because Bob Martin was approached a couple years ago about reprising his man in the chair character for a series called the City Center Encores series, which is in New York, where they kind of look back and rediscover sort of forgotten shows. It's usually by prominent authors and composers, but are shows that have kind of been lost to time a little bit. And one of the shows that they presented, I'm pretty sure, was Carmen Jones, which really wouldn't play today just because of racial stereotypes and overtones. But they presented it using Bob Martin himself as the man in the chair, explaining why this show was a hit and what the good aspects of it that we can still appreciate now. So it really was like life imitating art, imitating life back on stage in a different setting because of the man in the chair character that became so iconic.
Wow. See, I didn't know any of that. Wow.
Yeah.
This is why I picked you for
I'm a nerd. I read playbill.com daily.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay, so... Wow. No, I'm sorry. I'm still trying to wrap my head around man in the chair not being a part of the show. That's still messing with me a little bit. So now you've done the show before twice. And
yes. So
production aspects of this show, obviously simple, but could be more extravagant. We talked a little bit about the plane, at the end. Do you think this is a good show for like community theater, high school, things like that? Unfortunately, I did find out there is a Drowsy Chaperone Junior that exists, which makes me want to vomit. And I love junior shows. I love junior.
It's about 5 minutes long.
I run a children's theater, so I have to love junior shows. But I am a stickler for junior shows should be shows that stem from where the original show is already suitable for children,
Right.
and all the junior version is simply there's a few songs cut to make it shorter for them, and they'll make the ensemble a little bit more expandable and things like that. But it's things like Frozen Junior, Beauty and the Beast Junior, Little Mermaid Junior.
Totally. Yep.
But like, why do they have a Drowsy Chaperone Junior? And where it's like a lot of like the key elements are going to have to basically go away entirely. I bet you they have multiple man in the chair, but they probably turned that role into like an ensemble type role with like,
that would make sense.
A bunch of kids playing the men in the chair.
It would be kind of funny to see that. Yeah, the people in the chair.
Which is funny because in my experience, kids are so much better at memorizing lines than adults are. They are so much quicker. Like they'll memorize their lines and everyone else's lines. So if it's a matter of like, oh, this is too many lines for a kid, it's like, no, it's actually too many lines for an adult. The kids will be fine.
Yep.
But the
Quit projecting.
The content of it, it's like the title character is supposed to be tipsy the whole show. Like, why is there?
Yeah, right. He gets a little drunk, and he's a divorcee who's talking about really like heavy adult topics. Right. Obviously, you cut that stuff out, and I'm pretty certain I trimmed a little bit of that. Don't tell MTI when I did it at the high school, just because it was a little over their heads.
Yeah. I feel like it kind of could work for high schools, but when I found out that there was a junior version made, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to read that. I want to check it out, not to do it, but I want to check it out just out of curiosity to see how they butchered the show in order to make it
I felt the same way when I saw that there was a high school version of Chicago. I'm like
what?
How do you? Okay.
Yeah, same with
that was
Avenue
was
Q.
definitely not written for a high school ever.
Yeah. Avenue Q has one too, Avenue Q High School Edition, and it's like No, just pick a different show. Like, pick a different show.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep, pretty much.
If the show is if you don't feel like the show is appropriate as is for your school or your community theater, just pick a different show. Don't mess with what's already like in there. That was a fun tangent.
I'm with you.
Everyone gets to hear my very important opinion about what I feel about junior shows. So do you have obviously I kind of covered a little bit of the audience that this is kind of geared towards. Obviously, I think it's geared towards like teenagers and up, I think, are the ones who mostly enjoy. And obviously people who are into musical theater and can catch all the little nuances in there about musical theater parodies. Yeah,
it's not inappropriate, but it would definitely get a PG-13 kind of a rating, just because some of the content, in order to understand it, you really need to have a little bit more life experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. Do you have this is a dumb question because of course you do, but do you have a favorite part in the show, like a favorite scene or number?
This one of all the shows that I've done, probably the songs pop into my head at random times more than others. And especially the opening number about wedding bells will ring, wedding bells will ring, wedding bells will chime. That just pops into my head, really randomly. And I live within an earshot of a church. And so every once in a while when I hear the church bells chiming in the middle of the day, that song will pop into my head. I'm also a big fan of An Accident Waiting to Happen, because it's just, it definitely pays homage to the old 20s and 30s sort of Irving Berlin and Rodgers and Hart type musicals, but it's such a clever number on its own, that I love that song. And then the character of Mrs. Tottendale sings a lovely song at the top of Act 2. She's such a charming, lovely, innocent character, who's kind of losing her mind a little bit, kind of losing her memory. So yes, it's poking fun at that in a way, but it's also doing it so lovingly. And I will tell you that the song in the show is charming enough, but if you listen to the cast recording, there's a bonus track on there called "I Remember Love." At least I think I do, which was the song that Mrs. Tottendale sang originally. Which is basically, saying, I think that I remember love, but as it is, I'm so old that I could just be making this up. And so I would have a hard time as a performer, as a producer, as a director, picking between those two songs, which one I like better. Yeah. I think Love Is Always Lovely, the song that ended up in the show,
Love is Always Lovely in the end.
Yeah.
Which also
has probably
that
a better
kind of undertone where it's like,
Yeah. Yeah, just right, exactly. So I think it fits a little bit better in what the show ended up being. But in terms of which song I like better, I don't know if I could pick a favorite between those two.
Yeah, I know. I discovered on the soundtrack the cut number, and I remember thinking, oh, I'm sad this isn't in the show. And then, but like, Love is Always Lovely in the end. It's a really key number. That's such a fun role for a more mature person too, Mrs. Tottendale. I know we talked about in the first half, seeing like an Angela Lansbury or someone that in that kind of role. It's so fun. Okay, so I don't know. I'm thinking about mine. Accident Waiting to Happen. For those of you who don't know, Accident Waiting to Happen is performed by the two romantic leads and the male characters on roller skates and blindfolded, which is just funny and a little scary to watch. Now you said in your high school production you didn't do the roller skates.
We did not do the roller skates. No, I the guy that we cast, very handsome and sang like an angel, but really could barely put 2 feet in front of each other
on regular
without
shoes.
roller skates on. So we decided, to reduce the number of potential lawsuits and just pretend that wasn't in the script.
That's perfect. And well, I mean, it still plays. He's talking about an accident waiting to happen. That little metaphor between them and as well as like his situation. It still works than being blindfolded as he's clumsy. So,
totally.
So it works, but that is a super cute number. I personally like. Robert is on one of my list of if I were a guy dream roles because I love cold feet. the tap number that
yeah.
he does with George. It is such a fun number. I have used that song actually in my I teach a tap class, and I use that song a lot in my tap class as some choreography for that number because it's such a fun little tap number.
That would do it.
Yeah, it's super super fun. And then I'm always the one where it's like whatever number the ingenue is best known for, I tend to neglect that song and I will pick the other one that she's less known for, and that's my favorite.
Sure.
So obviously, I'm not like I love Show Off; it's fun, but I really like Bride's Lament, the female leads role, the poor forgotten solo for Janet because it gets totally upstaged by Show Off. But I was like, Bride's Lament, like it's so underappreciated, and I think that's what it is. I always have a soft spot for the underappreciated songs that get outshined by the other bigger, fancier number. But
right. Well, and I think they were really smart with that number because, it is the other number for Janet. Yes. But however, it's also like this acid trip of a psycho breakdown number at the same time. Fun. And at one point has, at least our production, had a tap dancing person in a gorilla suit.
Yep, ours too.
And oh goodness, I mean, it's just the amount of things that you can do with that. We also had, I believe in that number, we had all of our actors, holding gigantic 3 foot, tall cutouts of the guy who's playing Robert Johnson's head. I mean, just gigantic blow up, of this guy's resume picture, and I mean, it added to the nightmare quality. I think I have a great picture of Ben holding all of those because he wanted to take one home with him.
Oh my god!
Like, well, we're not going to do anything with them.
That was so fun. I remember I was in the ensemble of this show, and Bride's Lament was as much fun as it is for Janet to sing. It is really fun to be in the ensemble of that number too, for the whole nightmare aspect of it and how insane the staging is. Like, and not insane like usually when I say, oh my gosh, the choreography or staging is insane, like it's challenging. It wasn't that it was challenging. It's just literally insane.
No, this is literally insane. Yep.
Literally like, wait, what kind of acid are we on during this scene? So fun.
Yep.
Listen, we are almost out of time, Matt. What is there anything else you want to discuss or say about this adorable, fun, crazy, unique show of the Drowsy Chaperone?
Not especially. I mean, I will say, when I was approached to direct this show, I had reservations about it because I wanted to be in it. And then when I launched into the production aspect of it, it's funny, we had the exact number of characters in the show try out for it. Like we had one person who couldn't end up doing the show in the end, that stepped back out of it. But everybody else, we had the exact number of people that we needed, and it was such a remarkably talented group that I could have shuffled around a number of those actors between the different parts because the authors have given us so much to work with.
Yes.
Just as a performer, as a person, in the director's seat who gets to visualize who could play these roles. I mean, it just gives you so much creativity and so much leeway with how you can approach it, how you can cast it. And I will say, as I was directing it, in the production that I did in community theater, I had no notion that I would be directing it at a high school shortly after. It was during the run of the community theater production at Waukesha Civic where I was like, I've got the right number of people that could do the leads in this show and still like kind of mess around with who would play what parts. And it was a completely different experience working with high schoolers than it was with the more seasoned performers. But that, I think, is ultimately the success and the joy of this show, is because it's so silly and it's presented in a way that it winks at itself, that you can do so many different things with it and still have it be a success.
Yeah, and isn't that the shows we look for as directors of schools and community theaters we look for the shows that will give us a lot of different options. We look for the shows that have an expandable cast or minimized cast. We look for the shows where you can go extravagant with this set or you can keep it super simple. We look for ones where it's like there's a gajillion roles in here that could be short people, tall people, men, women, black people, white people, just like all the options. We want to keep all the options open because we never know what our audition turnout is going to be. We don't always know what our budget is going to be. So having shows where you have that kind of limitless creativity and can go a whole bunch of different ways with it is obviously like I said, it's director's dream because you're not stuck with like, okay, we got to do it a certain way or it doesn't work. It works so many different ways. Well, yeah, I totally agree with you. So we're just about out of time. Matt, thank you so much for joining me again. It was so nice to have you back. If you guys enjoyed this episode, make sure you check out the other one with Matt Zembrowski here. We talked about the Addams Family, and it was a super fun time.
Totally.
Yeah, so I'm just going to do some social stuff real quick. We are on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. You can feel free to like or subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Music, and Spotify. If you'd like more information on my little theater that I constantly can't shut up about in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, no one knows what Oconomowoc is. It's about 30 minutes west of Milwaukee. You can find the Box Theater Company on Facebook or on Instagram. Matt, do you have any social stuff you want to do?
No, not at the moment. I have lots of Facebook friends, so if you want to say hello, say hello.
He's got some of his great original music on that Facebook page if you guys are interested. Yeah. So that's gonna do it for today. Thank you again so much for our conversation on the Drowsy Chaperone, Matt. This is Broad's Way through Broadway, and that's our final bow, blackout, and curtain.